The initial snowflakes of that pivotal January dawn drifted softly over the sweeping meadows of Willow Brook. Henry Talbott, a 67-year-old with calloused palms and a beard as pale as the scenery around him, gazed from his cottage window as the heavens dimmed. The forecast had predicted a blizzard, but out here, 30 miles from the close village, such alerts often arrived too late. Henry tugged his faded play jacket tighter and stoked the flames in the wood stove. Winter had always been a solitary season on the farm since Ellenpest 5 years ago. The stable needed care, the livestock fed, but otherwise the hours dragged on, long and still. His daughter phoned from the city twice weekly, always asking if he'd consider relocating closer. Henry always refused. This land had belonged to his family for generations. He couldn't fathom being elsewhere. By mid-afternoon, fell-light snowfall had turned into something ferocious. Wind screamed around the edges of the old cottage, and visibility shrank to mere feet past the veranda. Henry was just settling down with a mug of warm tea when he heard a faint noise. Nearly drowned by the tempest, he placed his cup aside and listened mournfully. It sounded again, a horn, long and urgent. Henry peered through the ice-coated window, but saw only a wall of white. He grabbed his thick coat, scarf, and the cap Ellen had crafted years ago. Whatever was out there sounded like trouble, and trouble didn't wait for clear skies. The biting chill struck him like a solid force as he stepped outside. The snow was knee-deep already, and his worn boots sank with each heavy step. He followed the noise, trudging along the rural road near his land. The gully sliced through his layers, but Henry pushed on, one hand guarding his ice from the stinging flakes. After what seemed an endless trek, he spotted a tafflish of yellow against the pure white. A school bus tilted sharply into the roadside gully, its rear wheels spinning fiddly as the driver tried to back out. Henry approached, his heart racing. Through the windows, he saw a small face pressed against the glass. Children, at least a dozen, some weeping, others wide-eyed with fear. "Hello there," he shouted, his voice nearly lost in the galley. "Anyone hurt inside?" The door hissed open, and a frantic-looking driver appeared. "Thank heavens," the man said. "We were returning from the Science Center when the blizzard hit. GPS sent us this way. Then we skidded off. No cell signal. I've been honking for 20 minutes." Henry glanced past him into the bus. "How many kids?" 17, ages 6 to 12. "From Highlandville Elementary." Henry nodded, his mindle ready. "Tackling the issue. My farm's about half a mile away. Too far for the young ones to walk in this. I've got a tractor with a covered cart. Wait here, I'll return." The driver looked ready tockery with relief. "We've got no choice. The heater's running, but I don't know how long the fuel will hold." Henry hurried back home as fast as his ging legs allowed. In the stable, he started his old but trusty tractor, hitched the large covered cart used for hauling straw, and lined the floor with every quilt he could gather. By the time he returned to the bus, snow had nearly buried its tires. The children filed out one by one, bundled in their winter gear, but still shivering. Henry helped the smallest ones into the cart while the driver and an older woman, a teacher's aide, he learned, guided the rest. A small boy, no older than 6, with wide brown eyes, looked up at Henry as he lifted him into the cart. "Are you Santa?" the boy asked, teeth chattering. Henry grinned beneath his snowy beard. "No, lad, just a farmer." The trip back to the cottage was slow and perilous. Henry drove cautiously, mindful of his precious load. When they finally reached the house, he led everyone into the living room, stoked the fire until it blazed, and began preparing hot cocoa for 17 children and 2 adults. The teacher's aide, Ms. Carter, helped organize the children while the driver, Jim, tried desperately to contact the school or emergency services on Henner's landline. "The lines were down. Storms cut us off," Henry explained, handing Jim a steaming mug. "Roads are impassable now. Happens every few years out here. You're welcome to stay until it clears." The reality of their situation settled over the group. Children were settled in every available space: the guest room, Ellen's sewing room, even the study with its dusty tomes. Henry gathered all the blankets and pillows he could find, brought up preserved food from the cellar, and worked to keep everyone comfortable. That night, As the blizzard raged outside, Henry read tales by light to the youngest children. It had been decades since his home had echoed with such noise, such life. Despite the situation, he found himself enjoying their presence. "My mom will be so scared," whispered a girl named Rose as he tucked her in. "We'll reach her as soon as we can," Henry promised. "But you're safe here. Try to rest now for 3 days." Snowstorm trapped them. Henry taught the children how to tend the hens in festival, showed them how to bake Ellen's famous scones, and answered countless questions about farm life. The children, initially scared, began to embrace the adventure. They built snow forts when Thewins calmed, helped with tasks, and in the evenings, they gathered in the living room to share stories. On the morning of 4th day, the skies finally cleared. Henry was in the kitchen, teaching some children how to churn butter, when a deep rumbling sound filled the air. The house seemed to shake with it. "What's that?" one child asked, eyes wide. Henry tilted his head, listening. Fighter jets, Hesade, recalling the sound from his service days long ago. Militaries likely checking for stranded folks. They rushed outside, all 17 children bundled in mismatched scarves and hats. Some borrowed from Henry's closets. Above, 3 sleek jets sliced through the clear blue sky. Flying low over the stable, the children cheered and waved, though Henry knew they couldn't be seen. Within hours, the first snowplow appeared on the horizon, followed by emergency vehicles. Parents had been frantic, organizing parties that couldn't get through until now. As word spread of how Henry had sheltered the children, reporters began arriving. Henry stood uneasily on his veranda, uncomfortable with the tension. He held the smallest child, the boy who had asked if he was Santa, as cameras flashed. The headline would later read, "He saved 17 kids, then fighter jets soared over his farm." But that wasn't what mattered to Henry. It was the letters that arrived a week later, crayon sketches from the children, heartfelt notes from parents, an official citation from the governor. His daughter called, tears in her voice, proud after seeing him on the news. The most meaningful moment came a month later when a line of cars wound down his driveway. On a Sunday afternoon, familiars piled out the same families he'd met briefly during the emotional reunion after the rescue. They brought food, gifts, and most importantly, company. "We thought you might be lonely," explained Rose's mother, placing a casserole on Henry's kitchen table. The children kept talking about Farmer Henry and his magical farm. As spring neared, the visits continued. Henry found himself hosting Sunday dinners for various families, teaching children about sowing seeds and animal care. His farm, once so quiet, now often rang with laughter. One evening, as he sat on his veranda watching the sunset, Jim, the bus driver who had become a close friend, joined him with 2 cups of tea. "You know what's it?" Jim said, handing Henry a mug. "That storm was the worst thing to happen to me in 20 years of driving. Thought I'd lose my job over it." Henry nodded, sipping the warm tea. "Turns out," Jim continued, "it was also the best thing. Those kids learned more about strength and community in those 3 days than they would have in a year off school." Henry smiled, watching a familiar deer step from the woods at the edge of his land. Ellen always said, "Everything happens for a purpose." Thetwell men sat in easy silence as dusk fell. In the distance, Henry saw headlights approaching Ms. Carter, bringing her own children to stay through weekend and help with spring planting. The unexpected blizzard had swept away his solitude, replacing it with something he hadn't realized he missed. Henry was no longer just the man who saved 17 kids. He had become part of their lives, and they had become part of his farm, once merely a legacy to uphold, had transformed into something vibrant and purposeful again, and for an old farmer who had grown to use to quiet, that was the greatest rescue of all.